The forest in Michigan was dense, alive with the sounds of rustling leaves, chirping birds, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. It was a place I often retreated to, seeking solace in the embrace of nature. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. I always felt at peace here, surrounded by the towering trees and the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy. On this particular day, I decided to venture deeper into the forest than I had before. I packed my backpack with the essentials: water, snacks, a map, and my trusty camera. I had heard rumors of a hidden waterfall somewhere in the heart of the woods, and I was determined to find it. The path was narrow, barely more than a deer trail, and the underbrush was thick. I pushed through the brambles, my arms getting scratched by the thorns. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees growing taller and the shadows deeper. Despite the challenges, I pressed on, driven by curiosity and the thrill of discovery. After a couple of hours of hiking, I paused to catch my breath. I sat on a fallen log, taking a swig of water and glancing around. That's when I saw it, a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned my head, scanning the undergrowth, but saw nothing. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to a deer or a squirrel. But then I saw it again, a quick darting motion, and this time I caught a glimpse of something unusual. It was small, maybe 3 feet tall, with a hunched posture and greenish skin. My heart raced as I tried to process what I was seeing. Could it be a goblin? I had heard tales of such creatures in folklore, but I had never given them much thought. I stood up slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. The creature was partially hidden behind a tree, peeking out at me with large, curious eyes. Its ears were pointed, and it had a tuft of scraggly hair atop its head. My mind raced with questions. Was it dangerous? Was it alone? I decided to take a cautious step forward, my hands held up to show I meant no harm. The goblin didn't move, its gaze fixed on me. I took another step, and then another, until I was only a few feet away. It seemed to be studying me just as intently as I was studying it. "Hello," I said softly, not really expecting a response. To my surprise, the goblin tilted its head and made a soft, chirping noise. I took that as a good sign and slowly reached into my backpack. I pulled out a granola bar and held it out, offering it to the creature. The goblin eyed the granola bar suspiciously, then cautiously stepped forward. It reached out with a clawed hand and snatched the bar from my grasp, retreating a few steps before nibbling on it. I watched in amazement as it devoured the snack, crumbs falling to the forest floor. As it finished eating, the goblin looked up at me and made another chirping sound, this one sounding almost like a thank you. I smiled, feeling a strange sense of connection with this mythical being. I wondered if it had ever encountered a human before, or if it had always remained hidden in the depths of the forest. I spent the next hour sitting there observing the goblin as it moved about. It seemed to grow more comfortable with my presence, occasionally glancing in my direction as it explored the area. I took a few pictures with my camera, wanting to capture this extraordinary moment. The goblin didn't seem to mind, its curiosity outweighing any fear. Eventually, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest floor. I knew I needed to start heading back if I wanted to make it out of the woods before dark. I stood up and slung my backpack over my shoulder, giving the goblin a small wave. "Goodbye," I said, hoping it understood. The goblin watched me for a moment, then gave a small nod before disappearing into the underbrush. As I made my way back along the trail, my mind buzzed with the events of the day. I had come in search of a waterfall and had instead found something far more incredible. I couldn't wait to share my story with my friends and family, though I knew many would be skeptical. But I had the photos as proof, and the memory of those curious eyes would stay with me forever. I reached my car just as the last light of day faded from the sky. The forest was quiet now, the nocturnal creatures beginning to stir. I took one last look at the trees before driving away, feeling a sense of awe and wonder. The world was full of mysteries, and I had just uncovered one of them. It was a day I would never forget. It was a brisk, clear night in late autumn when I first saw him. The chill in the air hinted at the coming winter, and the leaves, now golden and red, rustled gently in the cool breeze. I had always loved walking in the woods near my home, especially at night. There was something peaceful, almost magical, about the way the moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long, silver shadows on the forest floor. On this particular night, I had decided to venture deeper into the woods than usual. My flashlight cut through the darkness, its beam revealing the path ahead. The familiar sounds of the forest surrounded me, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, and the gentle whisper of the wind through the branches. I felt a sense of tranquility as I walked, my thoughts wandering as aimlessly as my steps. As I made my way along the path, I noticed something unusual. The forest seemed unnaturally silent. The usual nighttime symphony had ceased, and an eerie stillness had settled over the woods. My skin prickled with unease, but I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me. I continued walking, my eyes scanning the darkness ahead. It was then that I saw him. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, an illusion caused by the interplay of moonlight and shadow. But as I drew closer, I realized that what I was seeing was real. He stood about 50 yards ahead, partially obscured by the trees. At first glance, he appeared to be an owl, perched high on a branch. But as I looked closer, I saw that he was much larger than any owl I had ever seen. His body was human-like, tall and slender, with long limbs and a broad chest. His face, however, was unmistakably that of an owl, with large, round eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The Owl Man, as I would later come to call him, seemed to sense my presence. He turned his head toward me, his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment we stared at each other, neither of us moving. His gaze was intense, almost hypnotic, and I felt an inexplicable sense of calm wash over me. After what felt like an eternity, he spread his wings, large feathered appendages that seemed too big for his slender frame, and took flight. He moved with a grace and silence that was both beautiful and terrifying. I watched, rooted to the spot, as he disappeared into the night sky, leaving me alone in the now eerily silent forest. I stood there for several minutes trying to process what I had just seen. My rational mind struggled to make sense of it, to find a logical explanation for the creature I had just witnessed. But deep down, I knew that what I had seen was real. The Owl Man was no mere figment of my imagination. I turned and began to make my way back home, my mind racing with thoughts and questions. Who or what was the Owl Man? Where had he come from? And why had he chosen to reveal himself to me? I knew that I would likely never find the answers to these questions, but the encounter had left an indelible mark on my psyche. In the days and weeks that followed, I found myself returning to the woods, hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious creature. Each night, I walked the same path, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the Owl Man. But he never appeared. The forest remained silent and still, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something. I began to research owls and other nocturnal creatures, hoping to find some explanation for what I had seen. I read about ancient myths and legends, stories of shapeshifters and forest spirits. Some of the tales spoke of beings who could take the form of animals, who lived on the fringes of human consciousness, rarely seen but always present. But none of the stories matched the creature I had encountered. As the months passed, my obsession with the Owl Man began to fade. I still walked in the woods, but the urgency to see him again had diminished. The forest, once a place of mystery and wonder, had become a reminder of an encounter I could never fully understand. One night, nearly a year after my first encounter, I was walking the same path, lost in thought. The air was colder now, the trees bare and skeletal against the dark sky. I had almost given up hope of ever seeing the Owl Man again when I heard a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible rustling in the trees above. I stopped and looked up, my heart leaping with a mixture of fear and excitement. There, perched high in the branches, was the Owl Man. His eyes glowed in the moonlight, and his wings were folded neatly against his sides. He looked down at me, and for a moment, I felt the same sense of calm that I had felt during our first encounter. We stared at each other for a long time, neither of us moving. I felt a strange connection to the creature, as if we were somehow linked by our shared experience. Finally, he spread his wings and took flight, disappearing into the night once again. I stood there watching him go, feeling a sense of closure. I knew that I would likely never see him again, but the encounter had changed me. The forest, once a place of mystery and wonder, had become a place of understanding and acceptance. As I walked back home, I realized that the Owl Man had given me a gift. The gift of seeing the world in a new way. I had witnessed something extraordinary, something beyond the realm of ordinary experience. And though I would never fully understand it, I knew that it had made my life richer, more meaningful. When the old Glenwood High School first shut its doors, there was a momentary buzz of nostalgia in the community, but it faded quickly. The building had been an eyesore for years, its once proud facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. As kids, we spun tales of ghosts and ghouls, whispering daring stories of the crawler, a phantom said to roam its abandoned halls. We never truly believed them, of course. It was just a fun way to pass the time until that one summer night. It started like any other Friday evening. I was hanging out with my friends Tommy and Lisa, lounging on the sagging porch of Tommy's house. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the yard. We were bored, itching for adventure, and that's when Lisa brought up the idea. "Let's go check out Glenwood," she suggested, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I heard they're tearing it down next month. It's now or never." Tommy and I exchanged glances. We'd all heard the stories. The crawler was a figure of local legend, described as a twisted humanoid creature that slinked through the halls on all fours, its movements unnervingly smooth and silent. It was a ridiculous notion, but there was something exhilarating about the idea of exploring the old school at night. We grabbed flashlights and hopped on our bikes, pedaling through the dim streets. The school loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the darkening sky. As we approached, a sense of foreboding settled over me. The fence around the property was rusted and broken in places, allowing us to squeeze through easily. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Our flashlights flickered over peeling paint and shattered windows. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the creak of the floorboards beneath our feet and the occasional drip of water from somewhere deep within the building. "This place is a dump," Tommy muttered, kicking aside a piece of debris. His voice echoed down the empty corridor. We moved deeper into the school, past classrooms frozen in time. Desks were still arranged in neat rows, though many were toppled or broken. Papers littered the floor, their edges yellowed with age. I picked one up, squinting to make out the faded writing. It was an old math test, covered in red ink corrections. A sudden chill ran down my spine as I wondered about the students who had once walked these halls. "Let's go to the gym," Lisa said, breaking the eerie silence. "That's where they say the crawler likes to hang out." "Perfect," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The gym was at the far end of the building, and as we made our way there, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak and groan of the building seemed amplified in the dark. We finally reached the double doors of the gym, pushing them open with some effort. The large open space was filled with shadows, our flashlights barely penetrating the darkness. The bleachers loomed to one side, and the old basketball hoops hung like skeletal remnants of a forgotten era. We stepped inside, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the cavernous room. Suddenly, Tommy's flashlight flickered and went out. "Damn it," he swore, smacking the flashlight against his palm. It sputtered back to life, casting a weak beam across the floor. We spread out, our lights scanning the gym. I aimed mine at the far corner, where the shadows seemed darkest. For a moment I thought I saw something move, a quick jerking motion. My heart skipped a beat and I swallowed hard. "Did you guys see that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "See what?" Lisa asked, her light darting over to where I was pointing. I thought I saw something. Moving, I said, feeling a bit foolish even as I spoke. Probably just a rat, Tommy said dismissively, but I could tell he was nervous too. We stood there, the three of us, our lights cutting through the darkness. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from behind us. We spun around, flashlights darting wildly. One of the old lockers had fallen over, its door hanging open. I took a tentative step closer, peering inside. Nothing. "Let's get out of here," Tommy said, his voice strained. "This place is giving me the creeps." We turned to leave, but then we heard it, a low guttural sound, almost like a growl. It echoed through the gym, sending a shiver down my spine. I spun around, my flashlight beam shaking. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But there in the corner of the gym, something was moving. It was low to the ground, almost hidden by the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized what I was seeing. The crawler. It was more horrifying than any of the stories. Its body was contorted, limbs bent at unnatural angles. It moved with an eerie fluidity, its eyes glinting in the light of our flashlights. For a moment, we were all frozen in place, too terrified to move. Then, as if in slow motion, the crawler began to move towards us. It was fast, far faster than anything that should move on all fours. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run, grabbing Lisa and Tommy by the arms. "Go, go, go!" I shouted, my voice high with fear. We sprinted out of the gym, our footsteps echoing wildly. Behind us, I could hear the crawler's movements, a soft, slithering sound that sent chills down my spine. We tore through the corridors, barely pausing to glance back. My lungs burned, and my heart hammered in my chest. Finally, we burst through the front doors and into the cool night air. We didn't stop running until we were a safe distance from the school, collapsing onto the grass, gasping for breath. "What was that?" Tommy panted, his eyes wide with terror. "The crawler," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's real." We sat there in stunned silence, the reality of what we had seen sinking in. The old stories had been true, after all. Glenwood High School wasn't just a relic of the past, it was a place haunted by something far worse than ghosts. We never went back to the school after that night, and we never spoke of the crawler again. But every time I pass by the old building, now just a pile of rubble, I can't help but feel a shiver of fear, remembering the night we came face to face with the legend. As I trekked through the humid swamps of the Florida Everglades, the dense canopy above filtered the sunlight into fragmented beams, casting an eerie glow on the murky waters. The air was thick with the earthy scent of decaying plant matter, mixed with the faint tang of brackish water. I had been wandering these wetlands for hours, driven by an insatiable curiosity and the rumors of a legendary creature known as the skunk ape. For years, tales of this cryptid had circulated among locals and cryptozoologists alike. Descriptions varied, but the common threads painted a picture of a large, ape-like being with dark, matted fur and an overwhelming stench. The thought of encountering such a creature was both thrilling and terrifying, but the allure of the unknown had always been too strong for me to resist. With each step, my boots sank slightly into the soft ground, leaving behind faint impressions in the mud. The cacophony of the swamp was ever present, the croaking of frogs, the distant call of a heron, and the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. My senses were on high alert, every sound and movement causing my heart to race with anticipation. As I ventured deeper into the swamp, I came across an area where the trees seemed older, their gnarled roots protruding from the ground like ancient fingers grasping at the earth. The air here felt different. Heavier, more oppressive. It was as if the very atmosphere was charged with an unseen energy. I paused, wiping the sweat from my brow, and took a moment to listen. The usual sounds of the swamp seemed muted, replaced by an almost palpable silence. I continued onward, my eyes scanning the terrain for any sign of the elusive skunk ape. It was then that I noticed something unusual, a series of large footprints, partially submerged in the muddy ground. Each print was deep and distinct, far larger than any human foot. My pulse quickened as I examined them more closely. The tracks appeared to follow a meandering path leading deeper into the dense foliage. Following the trail, I carefully navigated through the tangled undergrowth, my movements slow and deliberate. The prints led me to a small clearing where the ground was littered with broken branches and scattered tufts of fur. The smell hit me almost immediately, a pungent, musky odor that seemed to cling to the back of my throat. There was no mistaking it. I was close. The clearing was surrounded by a ring of towering cypress trees, their trunks covered in a thick layer of moss. In the center, I spotted what appeared to be a makeshift shelter, constructed from interwoven branches and palm fronds. It was crude but functional, providing a semblance of cover from the elements. I approached cautiously, my every instinct urging me to turn back, but my curiosity pushed me forward. Peering into the shelter, I saw evidence of recent activity. A nest-like arrangement of leaves and grass, a few scattered bones, and what looked like the remnants of a partially eaten fish. The smell was overpowering here, and I had to cover my nose to keep from gagging. This was undoubtedly the skunk ape's lair. As I stood there absorbing the reality of what I had discovered, a sense of unease washed over me. The stories of the skunk ape described it as a reclusive and unpredictable creature. While sightings were rare, encounters were often described as harrowing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that at any moment the beast could emerge from the shadows. The light in the clearing began to fade as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and shift with a life of their own. I knew I couldn't stay here much longer. With one last look at the shelter, I turned to retrace my steps, my mind racing with the implications of my discovery. As I made my way back through the swamp, the sounds of the night began to emerge. The rhythmic chirping of crickets, the distant hoot of an owl, and the occasional splash of something moving through the water all served as a reminder of the wild, untamed nature of this place. My pace quickened, driven by a growing sense of urgency to leave the swamp before darkness enveloped it completely. Just as I was beginning to feel a semblance of relief, a rustling noise behind me brought me to a sudden halt. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, and slowly turned to look. In the dim light, I saw a large, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the clearing. Its eyes glowed faintly in the twilight, and I could see the outline of its massive form, covered in dark, matted fur. The skunk ape. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The creature regarded me with a curious yet wary expression, its breath visible in the cool evening air. I could feel its presence, a palpable force that seemed to radiate from its very being. The stories hadn't done it justice. The reality was far more awe-inspiring and terrifying. Summoning every ounce of courage, I slowly backed away, keeping my eyes locked on the creature. It made no move to follow, simply watching as I retreated into the safety of the swamp. When I finally reached a safe distance, I turned and ran, my legs propelling me through the underbrush with a newfound urgency. The journey back to my vehicle was a blur, my mind racing with the events of the day. I had come in search of a legend, and I had found it. The skunk ape was real, and I had seen it with my own eyes. As I drove away from the swamp, the weight of what I had experienced began to settle in. I knew that the memory of that encounter would stay with me forever, a testament to the mysteries that still lurk in the hidden corners of our world. In the days that followed, I pored over my notes and the evidence I had collected. I knew that many would be skeptical, dismissing my story as just another tall tale. But I also knew the truth. The skunk ape was out there, a living, breathing testament to the unknown. And for those willing to venture into the depths of the Everglades, the possibility of an encounter with the elusive cryptid remained as tantalizing as ever. I had just moved into an old Victorian house nestled at the edge of town, its charm overshadowed by rumors of eerie occurrences. Ignoring the tales, I settled in, eager to make this historic place my home. The first few weeks were uneventful. I spent evenings unpacking boxes and arranging furniture, accompanied only by the creaks and sighs of an aging house settling into the night. But one fateful night, everything changed. I awoke to a soft, ethereal glow suffusing the room, casting strange shadows on the walls. My heart raced as I saw her, a young woman, pale and translucent, standing at the foot of my bed. Her eyes held a sorrowful gaze, and her presence chilled the air around me. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling despite my attempt to stay calm. She didn't speak, but gestured toward the window, where moonlight filtered through tattered curtains. I followed her gaze, expecting to see something outside, but instead, I saw memories unfold like a silent film. I saw her laughter echoing through the halls, heard the faint strains of music from forgotten parties, and felt the warmth of a life lived long ago. It was as if she wanted me to understand her, to witness the fragments of her existence that lingered in this house. As suddenly as she appeared, she faded into the misty shadows, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. Was it a dream, or had I truly encountered a ghost from another time? In the days that followed, I delved into the history of the house, uncovering stories of a young woman who tragically passed away decades ago. Her spirit was said to wander the halls, searching for closure or companionship in this world she couldn't leave behind. Since that night, I've felt her presence lingering, a gentle touch in the breeze, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye. I've come to accept her as a part of this house, a silent companion from another realm. Sometimes in the quiet of the night, I hear her whispers, soft and indistinct, like echoes from a distant past. And I wonder if she found solace in sharing her story with me, a fleeting connection between the living and the dead.